Hi, everybody. You are listening to Judging Meghan with your host, Megan Judge. I am going to introduce Reshma Kearney right away because I know I'm going to butcher the intro and I didn't write it down. She's a trauma-informed yoga instructor and a mental health advocate. I did it. Can you believe it? I
Yeah.
always butcher. I mean, my listeners know I always butcher. I always butcher an intro. So I wanted to get that out of the way because usually I do a quick intro. But I'm going to bring you into the intro really quickly. I met Reshma over Instagram. I started following her. Most of my platform, my listeners know, is about suicide prevention. Is a huge piece of my platform. Just my own struggles. Recently, I lost somebody very close to me in November, and so I will continue as long as I have this platform and the podcast, trying to do what I can, just like what you're doing, to try and end the stigma and asking for help and all the things that go along with it. And there's so many people that are struggling right now. And so I do this because is it fun for me to talk about, oh, I was suicidal in 2020 and people talk and I'm assuming people say, give me the labels of I'm crazy and all the things. But thank God I don't really care because if I can help just one person in my life save somebody's life, just I'm sure you feel the same way, then this is all worth it. So I'm going to say that. The other thing I'm going to say very briefly is please, if you're a listener and a longtime listener, I'm coming up on my 6-year anniversary of doing this podcast. I just hit, believe it or not, the top 10 of the Apple charts for mental health. And it makes me emotional because I'm not a celebrity. I'm just a regular girl that lives in Manhattan Beach, California. I'm a mom, and I worked really hard to make this podcast what it is. And I don't need the accolades and all of that stuff, but just to know that people listen and maybe I'm helping people normalize grief and loss and struggling as a parent and all the things, then I just want to say to my listeners, thank you so, so much, because it means the world to me that you listen every week. And more importantly, I love your feedback. And more importantly than that, anybody that wants to message me, I love your messages. And nobody to me is not important. So if you want to come on my podcast and you want to talk about your own story, reach out to me, because I don't care who anybody is. I don't care if you have a book and you're a best-selling author or you're just somebody that has a story and you think you can help someone else. Please reach out to me, because that's why I do this. So that's it. Oh, and last, if you could take 2 seconds and go to Apple or Spotify or YouTube and leave me a review, I would really appreciate it. So thank you. Okay. So all of that's out of the way. Thank you so much for coming on. I
Thank you
really
for me.
appreciate it.
I'm really proud of you. Congratulations on the 6-year anniversary. You're making a huge impact.
Thank you. It's kind of crazy to think, I'll say this to you. We kind of chatted a little bit before we started recording, that when I started this, I was in the worst place of my life. And if I listen back, which I never have, because I'm just too terrified to hear what I sounded like and how horrible I was at podcasting, I was in such a dark place that my therapist at the time, Dr. Nadine Macaluso, said, well, why don't you do something creative? I couldn't work because I was having such horrific panic attacks. And I wanted to do something. It was COVID, all of the things. And so I picked up a microphone and I just started it. And then it's 6 years later. It's so touching to me to meet people like you, or to follow your story on Instagram and see how transparent you are and how much work you're doing to help other people. And I think that that's what life is about. So it's using our own pain with purpose to help others. So with that being said, I want to start with you. Tell me where you're from, and we're just going to start there.
Yeah, well, thanks again for having me on. I'm not too far from you. I'm in Orange County. I'm in Irvine. So,
I know we talked about this, so we need to meet up and have coffee or lunch or
yeah,
something.
I would love that. Yeah. And I love living here. We talked about that a little bit too.
Hmm.
Um, it's because of um, tragic circumstances that I moved here in 2023 to be near family, but I'm really glad that I did. The kids and I are really happy here.
Where are you originally from?
I'm originally from Illinois, but I went to graduate school in Atlanta, Georgia, and that's where I met my late husband, Sean. We met
Hmm.
at the Centers for Disease Control. He was taking a year off of medical school in Connecticut to do a public health fellowship. So it was like an office romance. We thought we were being really slick and meeting each other outside the office for lunch. And then when we finally shared with people that we were dating, everybody already knew. And then since then, I've lived in Washington State, North Carolina, Georgia, back to Washington State, and now California.
Okay, so let me ask you this, and this is kind of a light thing before we go into the heavy stuff.
Yeah.
Out of all of the states that you have lived in, which one is your favorite? And I know that you have
Yeah.
memories, so take out the part, but as far as states go, because everybody gives California such a bad name. That's where
I
I'm trying to
know.
go. And it
Yeah.
makes me so infuriated because I'm actually not from California, but I've lived here almost 30 years and I love it so much.
Yeah.
We have issues like every other state, but I hate when people bash it. So when you said to me how much you love it, it makes me so happy.
Yeah. I think I can't say this is my favorite yet, but I can
Hmm.
see it becoming my favorite. I just haven't been here long enough. Um, but I would say Washington State was my favorite. And this is like still West Coast, and there's still very much that West Coast vibe that I felt in Seattle, except there's so much more sun here.
Yeah.
So I can see this becoming my favorite. And you can't beat living near family. Uh,
Yeah.
I could
Yeah.
live in a very small town in the middle of nowhere if my family was there. So there are a lot of reasons why I think this will soon become my favorite state.
Well, I think too, I mean, we're going to go into the story, but when you're near family, my sister's actually about to move to California from Washington, D.C., and I'm so excited because I think there's nothing like that, that peace and that support, especially I feel like as I'm getting older, my family, my mom's in Florida, the rest of my family's in DC. It's hard for me to know that I'm not going to be able to see them as we get older. So it's almost like my older sister and I are she's moving out here and we get to kind of I hope grow old together. You
Yeah.
never know. So I think it's really special.
Yeah.
Okay, with that being said, um I know this is a hard story to share, but I do want to find out more about your husband and how I love how you guys met. I also want to know if you got in trouble for the office romance. So why don't you take it from there? I want to know, the story of how you fell in love and moved around, and so I'll just let you go with that.
Yeah, we, like you said, we met in Atlanta. We were both at the Centers for Disease Control, and it started off with just being friends. We would be in meetings together, and I thought he was funny, but there, it always ends up being the guy that you think you would never date.
Mm.
He's so not for me. We have nothing in common, not my type. And I just immediately was drawn to his intelligence and his sense of humor and hung out with him, got to know him better, and then eventually thought, okay, I think I like him. And so, no, we did not get in trouble. Um, it was very quick the way our relationship moved. We met and we were friends, and then we started dating. And probably 1 or 2 months into the relationship, his dad died. And I had never met his dad. His dad was older and had some health conditions. And so at that point, it's like you either stay for the long haul or you leave. At
Mhm.
least that's how I felt. And I was 25. So I was really young, and that's how I felt at the time, that this guy's dad just died. I can't leave,
Mhm.
And so I think going through that with him intensified the relationship. And um 6 or 7 months into dating, we were engaged. And then 8 months later, we were married. And it was the day after our honeymoon when we moved to Washington State into a new home that we bought together. And the very next day, he started a residency in orthopedic surgery at the Army Medical Center in Tacoma, Washington.
So did he have a history of did he serve in the armed
Yeah, he
services?
he
Okay.
was he was in the Army. And when he died, he had only been separated from the Army for 9 months. And at that time, he was a lieutenant colonel, and he was practicing as an orthopedic surgeon.
Okay, did he end up going overseas and serve any okay,
Yeah,
so
he
okay.
did. He did 3 deployments. Um, the first one was in Iraq or Afghanistan, then Iraq, and then Syria.
And were you together at the time when he was deployed?
Yeah, his
Okay.
deployments were all after we had children.
Oh,
So,
wow. Okay. Okay.
yeah.
So as far as, your relationship went, it obviously was like a whirlwind. It sounds like you got engaged and married really quickly. And then obviously you dealt with the grief of losing his dad and you were there for him. But was your relationship like aside from did his issues with depression start because of serving or what was the history there?
It's hard to say.
Mhm.
I don't think that I think that he had depression when I met him.
Mhm.
Depression and anxiety. I don't think it just started during our marriage or after the deployments or when we got out of the Army. I think he always had it, and I think that he didn't work through it. And he was also very smart, and he knew how to answer those depression scales,
Mhm.
uh, just like the alcohol use scales, the surveys. He knew how to answer those. He was a physician. So I think that he might have known that he was struggling, but he avoided confronting it. And in the beginning of our marriage, I saw a little bit of that, but there were always things that I attributed it to. So, in the beginning of our marriage, it was like new marriage. We had just moved across the country. He was in an orthopedic surgery residency, a lot of stress, long hours. And so at that time, it was like, okay, well, we just have to get through these 5 years, and then it'll be okay because then he'll be practicing and then we'll have a family. And then when he got out of residency, then it was like, okay, well, now it's a new position. Now he's deploying. Now we have, we lost a baby
Mhm.
together. We had a stillborn.
Oh,
I was 30
so
weeks pregnant.
sorry.
Thank
Oh.
you. So, it was like, okay, we had a stillborn. All right, now we have this first child, and he's unsure of where he's going to be in the Army. And so he's stressed. And then, you keep having kids, you keep living life. There were deployments thrown in there. There were his own issues with his family thrown into that. Just a lot of things. And you keep thinking it'll get better. We just have to get through this. But over time, I noticed that every hard time that we went through together got a little more intense and lasted a little bit longer.
So when you said something that struck me that you said is he had a great sense of humor.
Hmm.
So I think a lot of times, obviously, I talk about this all the time. Women openly talk about struggling. I mean, it's just part of our nature. The greatest part of being female is I think we can bond with each other and help each other through things. Women are great that way. We're awful in other ways, like being catty and talking crap behind each other's backs. But in as far as being able to talk about problems, or if you're struggling mentally, it's almost like that's something you just do with your girlfriends, whereas men do not do that, right?
Right.
My husband and I were watching, there's a show called Four Seasons. It's really good. It's on Netflix right now, and it's Tina Fey, and it's on season 2. And whenever I have men come on that talk about depression or suicidal ideations or any of that, I'm always so grateful to them, because I have a lot of women that want to come on and talk about it, but not as many men. And so I say this all the time on the podcast. It's like putting two sticks together, building the fire, and then the fire spreads, and then we normalize helping, and that it's okay for men to talk to each other about it. So last night we were watching this episode, and Steve Carell's character, and I'm giving away the show, sorry audience if you're watching it, but I'll just give you this little snippet. They got into a physical fight where they were beating each other up, and then they got tired, and then they just went to the ground, and it was over. And they didn't talk about the real issue behind why they were mad, but they fought. They used the physical stuff. Whereas I'm sorry, I had to kind of pivot and say that, because when you said the humor piece, or, talking about it, thinking that things were going to get better, working through it, there's so many people that can relate to that in being in a couple, of building a life, keeping up with the Joneses, the financial piece, having kids. I'm so sorry, this stillborn part. I mean, that for men also, I don't think the grief of losing a child. I lost a baby pretty far along, but not stillborn. And I remember my husband dealt with it in a completely different way than I did. So I just wanted to say all of those things, and I'm sorry that's so long-winded, but I know that's also a big giant question of, was the humor and all of those things covering up what he was really dealing with?
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure the humor, the achievements, the nonstop work, the adventure seek, moving his body constantly, listening to music constantly. These are all things that I look back on and realize now that were just blocking out the thoughts that he must have been having. And I think you bring up a good point that men and women express themselves so differently. They ask for help. I mean, men really don't ask for help, but we look for help in different ways. We just have these different languages when it comes to mental health and how to support each other. And that's something I've learned from all of this, that I, as a woman and as a mother, will always try to immediately fix it by talking, by looking up resources, by reaching out to people, by doing, right? That's just how we are. That's how we're wired. But that's not what our men need. Our men need to just be heard, and they need to feel supported. And when I did that with Sean, when he did come to me with his problems, now he never came to me and said, I'm depressed, or I'm having these thoughts, right? But there were always these other things that were going on. And so we'll use work for an example. When he'd come to me with issues that he was having at work or within the Army, I wouldn't just, there were times where I'd sit and let him speak, but there'd also be many times where immediately I want to talk about it, and I want to look things up, and I want to tell him to go ask this person for help, go ask him to cover for you this weekend so you can take a break. You should take this medication. You should do this. You should stop doing that, right? And I think what he needed was to just be heard and to know that I had his back, even though I feel that I was telling him that and showing him that, he might not have heard that through my words and actions.
How does that feel for you, though? Because the audience obviously knows that he he ended his life and how, I mean, because we've kind of already said that, but just saying that, trying your best to try and fix things in your own way. And then did you deal with, and now dealing with all the guilt that you did things the wrong way, even though you didn't, you did it to the best of your ability. But the guilt piece is so hard to deal with. And it's different than losing somebody the way that this way is so hard because you have the shame, you have the guilt. Whereas if you lost somebody to cancer or they were murdered or all of the horrible things that can happen when somebody dies, you don't have that additional layer, right? And so can you touch on that?
Yeah, I had a lot of guilt.
Mm-hmm.
I questioned, you know, every conversation we had in the week or two prior. Uh, we had, when he separated from the Army in December of 2021, he got a job in Washington State while we were still living in Augusta, Georgia. And he went out in January of 2022 and wanted the kids and I to go too. And I said, no. I said, I want the kids to finish out their school year here in Augusta, and then this summer we'll join you. And so when he first died, I questioned whether that was the right thing
Mm-hmm.
to do. If I had moved with him in January, would this have happened? And everybody goes through that. Every survivor of suicide loss that I've spoken to goes through that. And I've just done enough work on myself in my own healing and talked to enough people that I'm fairly confident in myself when I say I did the best that I could with what I knew at that time. I changed our way of eating. I got him out to hot yoga. I would encourage him to journal. If I was reading something and there was a quote that I thought would help him, I'd send it to him during the day. I really did try to do as much as I could, short of dragging him into a therapist's office or a doctor's office. And even then, I did get him as far as marriage counseling. And in those sessions, when we'd start to talk about his childhood or his stuff, he'd so conveniently switch gears and we wouldn't dive deep into that.
Mm-hmm.
So, I couldn't have done anything more. I really don't.
No, I mean, the reason I asked that is also for my listeners
Yeah.
or, just because there is, like I told you in the beginning in November, I had lost somebody very close to me and, it's family and, and I see what my I don't talk about who it is right now because I just
Of
can't, but
course. Yeah.
for their protection too. Um, but I just see the pain of the grief of the guilt is so fresh. And that's the hardest thing to see somebody go through when they lose somebody this way. And I think it's so important when you talk about this, and I'm so happy and to hear that you've done the work and you've been in therapy because I think there's a lot of people when I interview people that have lost someone this way that just shut down. I just had a man come on and he was in the Australian CIA and he basically he put himself in this undercover program. He wanted to get killed himself because he just couldn't deal with the pain. And I think there's just so much of that. People turn to alcohol or drugs, or anything to numb it and not live in it. And I think that that's a very, very real thing. So
I had to live. I
yeah,
had to live in
you
it.
have kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know where I'd be if I hadn't, if I didn't have my kids,
Mm-hmm.
because I can honestly say that I only got out of bed the first several months because of them to get them.
How old were your kids at the time? I don't ever really like asking how or why because I don't think that's, at least for me, I don't want to focus on that piece, and nor do my listeners. But I like to talk about, the deeper things, like being a mother, having to deal with the grief yourself, having to deal with the aftermath, the immediate
Yeah.
aftermath, and the pain, like you said, of not getting out of bed or not being able to, but having to. So can you talk more about that?
My kids were 10, 8, and a brand new 7.
Mm.
Our youngest had turned 7 6 days before Sean died. And yeah, it was wild. We had a birthday party for her the weekend before. It was a luau theme party, and he did all the things that he always did. Picked up the cake, helped with decorations, helped with games, and it was a really nice day. I look back on that and think, what did I miss?
Mm-hmm.
I I don't know what happened in those few days, right? But yeah, so my kids are now 14, 12, and 10 and a half. It'll be 4 years in September. And like I said, the first several months, I was a zombie. I was just moving to take care of them. I was only thinking about them. I would get up in the morning, walk them to school around the corner, and walk straight back to the house and just get into all the paperwork that you end up with after you lose somebody. And I did that for several months until I realized it was just not healthy. I wasn't creating a healthy, healing space for my kids like I wanted to. So I just started being more intentional about how I was showing up every day. And it was really small. Just instead of going straight home after dropping them off to school, I promised myself I would go for a 20-minute walk.
Mm.
And
So
then
like little baby steps every
little
day.
baby steps.
Yeah.
I felt like crawled my way to this place. And that's fine. I want people to know that you don't just wake up one day and all of a sudden everything's feeling great in your body,
Mm-hmm.
your mind, and your heart. This is a journey, and I'm still going to be crawling on some days to
Mm.
get through the day. It's hard. And so it started with that 20-minute walk. And then while I was walking, I would call my dad and my mom and talk to them. And then slowly I would call family back, other family members. And then I would slowly call friends. So I think by 4 or 5 months out, I had spoken to my really good friends and even talked about that day. Um, and then started to do more within our community. I would accept the invitations to lunch and dinner. And
Was the community supportive? I mean, I just know in general, it's a very tricky thing, right? Because
yeah,
people, and just in grief in general, nobody knows what to say. So you're going to get people that are in the beginning are going to be dropping off the cakes, the food, doing the meal delivery, being there, and then they start to trickle away and the year mark, everyone's like, oh, they're fine. They're not grieving anymore, right? And then life goes on. How
yeah,
was the community for you?
yeah. The community was amazing,
Mm,
especially because the kids and I had only moved to Bellevue, Washington 3 months, not even 3 months before he died.
mm,
So my kids were in a brand new school
mhm,
um, for just a couple weeks before he died. So those families that were at the birthday party just a few days before were people we had only met in 2 weeks prior. And so it was a shock to them. I mean, it was a shock to me. So, of course, it was a shock to everybody around us. But for the most part, everybody in the community was compassionate and very sensitive to our need for space. The school was amazing. The principal of the school called 2 days later on a Sunday to talk to me. And then Monday, the kids wanted to go back to school, and they had they had called extra counselors in from the school district to be on site. And they went into into my kids' classrooms and spoke to the students about, not that their dad died by suicide, but this student, your friend, lost his dad or her dad. And these are the things we do to support them, and these are the things we don't do.
Hmm.
And I was really grateful for the entire community.
How did your kids deal with it? I mean, how old was your oldest? I think you said 10.
10, yeah.
Jeez. Okay, so shock, like, like
Yeah,
I'm sure, I'm assuming each kid has dealt with it in a different way.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. They have, and what's so surprising to me is the way they first responded to the news is how they have grieved. So when I say that, what I mean is that day they were given the news that their dad died, that he died by suicide. And my oldest didn't have anything to say, but immediately tears started running down his cheeks.
Hmm.
My middle one just looked, she was just in shock, mouth open, eyes wide open, and had nothing to say, no emotion, stoic. And the youngest one immediately started crying, looked to me and asked me, "Is this a joke?" And then had so many questions the rest of the day. And now when I look at them almost 4 years later, my oldest is an angry griever. And so you might not get a lot of words, but you're going to see it in his body and you're going to see it in his behavior. And
Hmm.
I still get calls from the school about his behavior, and I know where it's coming from, you know. My middle one is what I call a quiet griever. And so she just, you don't really know where she's at, what she's thinking, but every now and then she'll start talking. And every now and then she'll just melt down and then say, "I miss daddy." And then my youngest one has just always been very expressive, um, has advocated for her own grief and her own need for space and support. And she still to this day asks a lot of questions. So it's interesting. And this is why I tell the women that I work with, or even on social media, I'm talking about how to hold your child's grief and why it's so important that we as moms show our children how we are grieving. And
Hmm.
don't try to hold back the tears, and don't turn your body when you're feeling angry. Let them see how grief shows up in you, because you're modeling to them not just how it can show up, but you're modeling to them that it's okay. It's okay to feel all those emotions, and there are healthy ways to feel them and to express them.
I was wondering too, you brought up, the shock piece of it. We've talked about the guilt piece of it. Did he set you, were you okay financially? Did he leave directions and paperwork? Because I know I talk to women sometimes that are left with, where is everything? I What do I do? What are the passwords? So you're already dealing with the shock of loss and the grief and the way that it happened, and then all the guilt yourself. And then on top of that, you're now the head of a household. You have 3 kids. Where are the passwords? Where is the money? How are you going to pay the bills? Are we insured for this, this, and this? That's like all a huge additional layers, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I was a stay-at-home mom too.
Mm.
I had stopped working. We had our oldest, who was 10 at the time. So I had not been working for 10 years.
Hmm.
And I did deal with that. I had to look for passwords, and there was no note. There were no instructions. Mm. And unfortunately, there was no life insurance that helped me, that supported me. When he got out of the army, he, for whatever reason, declined the Army life insurance. And then he signed a new policy in Washington State. And I even appealed the decision. Um, and I had this 45-minute interview where they really have this horrible way of making you feel like you're a criminal or like
Mm,
your husband is a criminal. So I
hmm.
had to answer all these questions. And then at the end, they still denied any type of support because he had signed the policy um, in October of the year before, and he died in September.
I mean, it's so wrong. I mean, it's so
And
wrong. And it's makes me think too that me and I, again, this is just me, but that it's the split decision piece of suicide. Um, and you had talked about, questioning, well, he seemed fine that weekend, or he seemed, I'm just going to talk about myself and what I went through, and I'm very open about it. I couldn't stop thinking about it, and I wouldn't, and it was in my head every single night. I could not stop. And during the day, I have a good sense of humor. I'm funny. It almost haunted me, like tapping me on the shoulder at night to say, "You're not good enough. You're not worthy. What are you doing here? You don't." And again, I was diagnosed with something called complex PTSD. So it's a brain injury, and it's very common that, PTSD. That's why I kind of asked about his service. What happens to our brains when we go through trauma? I went through trauma as a very young child, and it's kind of followed me through my life, that it eventually bubbled up. And really, honestly, when you're in that place, I understand it. I thankfully got help. I went on medication and therapy and all this stuff, but I could not get it out of my head. And so when I hear stories of, it's almost like it's an out of body kind of thing. And that's why I reference this book by Kevin Hines a lot, where it talks about him. And I've talked about this on the podcast before. On the San Francisco Bridge, they now have a gate up where they've cut the suicide by, I don't even know the percentage, but there's statistics on once people let their hands go off the bridge, that every single person that survived that fall has said, I regretted it the second I did it. So it's almost, I like to say, for me at least, it's a monster that lived in my head that I couldn't get to leave my head until I really got help. And so that's the worst part of it for you, because it also should make you almost have some peace that it was that
Yeah.
split decision thing, because I know he must have loved you and your
Yeah.
children, and so that's all I was going to say about that piece of it.
Yeah, and I appreciate you sharing your story. I know that's difficult to live through and to share, I'm sure. And I've had so many people reach out to me through DMs and say, I know how your husband was feeling.
Mm.
And they then describe their own darkest moment. And
Hmm.
I've now heard enough stories that I know that he was sick. He had an illness, and he just, being a man in the military and in medicine, unfortunately the odds were against him, you know. There was just no safe space for him. And I thought I could create that for him, just me by myself, but I couldn't. And so, yeah, I know he loved me. I know he loved the kids. When he was alive, I questioned it because sometimes he just wasn't present, or, he had anger issues, or the
Hmm.
drinking would get out of control sometimes. And now when I look back at all of that, I know where it came from. Um, and so I just hold so much more compassion for him and for anybody else like him, like those who died by suicide and those who are struggling. So I appreciate that you share that. And I know that helps so many people when you do share that.
I also shared it for the purpose of, I hate that the worst part of it is for the people that are left behind. And sorry, I'm crying, but that's the worst part of it is because the people that have died the way that they did would never have wanted to hurt the people that they loved. And I understand that. And so I think that that kind of pain is really hard. But I also wonder, do you believe he's with you? Do you believe in signs? Do you believe, I talk a lot about grief and loss and signs. And you mentioned, it's 4 years is such a short time.
Yeah.
And so I talk about grief. Grief, I will be carrying my grief for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That's part of the cycle of life. I think it's important to, especially for kids. I told you before, I think in the podcast or before we started recording, I lost my dad at 12. And I blocked a lot of my memories out of my father, but that was, I'm a very old lady now. So that was a long time ago. And I know that my grief still will pop out of nowhere. And it's okay. It's okay to have hard days, or it's okay to have
Yeah.
days where you want to just sit in your bed and not leave or have silence, or your child is angry and has
Yeah.
to work through that anger, because again, these kids don't have fully formed brains. So that's the worst part of losing a parent the way that they did.
Yeah.
They don't understand it. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. This is our reality.
Mm-hmm.
Grief is a never-ending journey. And yeah, my kids understand that. I tell them that it's the same thing. It's okay if you have a bad day. It's okay if you cry. I love when my son cries, because every time he cries, I know that he's not there yet at that point where all of a sudden he's going to think he can't cry anymore, right? Because at some point, a boy, as he transitions into manhood, is taught by someone or somewhere that he can't cry.
Yeah.
And I read something once, boys who are not allowed to cry grow up to become angry men.
This all makes sense for what we're living through right now, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's true. It's true.
Yeah.
And so the piece of it that it's okay to be emotional is a win. Like you
Yeah.
said, that's a win.
Yeah.
That he's able to express himself. I think that's part of the biggest issue, and why it's so important to continue this conversation. Because every single day I feel like, especially in the past year, or maybe it's been, but just with social media, how many times are we seeing, actors that have lost their lives this way, or, oh, another one. And then again, a lot of times I always use Robin Williams,
Mm-hmm.
because he was the epitome of funny, hiding himself. And I follow you on Instagram, and I see videos of your husband, and there's videos of him being funny and with the kids and doing all this stuff. And in my own life, in my own situation, when I was really struggling, I would be doing characters, because I used to be an actress, and I would make all these videos, and I thought I was so funny. And then, I was dealing with what I was dealing with. So I think that it's so important that you continue to talk to your kids, to get this messaging out. I'm so grateful for your Instagram, by the way, because when I see, my algorithm has a lot of that, and then I find you, and that I just brought up signs and knowing that he's with you. I wanted to know, I know, I say they're in the next room. I talk about this all the time. I really, truly believe it. And I wonder if he must just be in the next room with you guys. You just can't see him. And he must be like, I am so proud of you.
Thank you.
Really,
I do wonder, I absolutely agree. I think that he is around. We get signs from him, especially on
Mm,
milestone days. We know that every Coldplay song that comes on is him. And we know that, a drastic change in weather around a milestone is him. The kids think he's having fun with us. The very first death anniversary, every year we go to the beach, just the four
uh-huh.
of us, and we get Jimmy John sandwiches. Those were his favorite for lunch. And we just go to the beach. And the very first year, we got to the beach and we had to hike with our chairs and all this stuff. We weren't expecting this hike. And then it started raining. And my son started laughing and he was like, "Yeah, that's dad just trying to mess with us right now." And so, yeah, I do believe in signs. I think that he is always around. Um, I appreciate you saying that he must be really proud of me. I think that he is, but I also sometimes wonder if he were to come back just for 24 hours, what would he think about how much I'm sharing? Because I'm sharing very openly, and I know some others out there might think I'm being disrespectful or it needs to be kept private, but
Yeah.
but when I share, I'm not sharing to tarnish his reputation. I'm sharing to make his story matter, you know? I'm sharing to make out what we've been through matter. And I'm sharing to set an example for my kids, first and foremost. My 14-year-old is going to get an iPhone this summer before he goes to high school. He's going to have social media. He hasn't had it for 14 years. And no,
Congratulations. Let me
thank
just
you.
say that because we're doing that. I have a 16 and I made the mistake of getting it in sixth grade. And now I have a almost seventh grader, no phone till high school.
Good. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's hard, but
Yeah.
the thing is now as like my kids see my social media and
Yeah.
they even know some of the horrible things that people say about
Mm.
suicide loss, about their dad, about our family, about me. They know, and I don't shield them from that when they're with me because we then have very good conversations about it. But my son is going to have social media and he's going to see things that I don't even know about, and he's going to start growing with this. And I want to see a day where he can talk about his loss and we know there's not going to be any judgment in the comment section, you know?
I mean, here's the thing. People can be, and I'm sorry, that actually makes me sick. And those people that walk a mile in your shoes is all I can say.
Yeah.
Because what you're doing is the good part of social media and the good part of the internet. I mean, I live in a very, even though I live in LA, I live in a very small town. And do you think, I mean, I posted something because I was on somebody else's podcast today talking about how I was suicidal. And I know that people in my small little town in Manhattan Beach are like, she must be crazy or whatever they say. But the reason I do it and I talk about it is because of because I want to help somebody else. I want to know that maybe there's some mom out there that went through something similar to me and she lives all in a different country even. And me talking about it and her seeing my face makes her go, you know what? Okay, she's talking about it and she's still here. Just like for you, there's some young mom with 3 kids in some place that is seeing you share. And that day, she's going to get out of bed because of you. And then I think the fact that people are so mean is the part that's the hardest part about social media and Instagram. But when you see those, my advice to you is just hit block because
No,
they have to live in their own miserable world of spewing hate. That's what I think, at least.
yeah. Yeah,
Right?
I don't do anything. I don't
Okay.
I don't respond, I don't delete, I don't block, because I have grown such a big community of people who are loving and compassionate,
Yeah.
need this space, who want to be a part of this space, who are super supportive. I know I'll see a comment and I know within a couple hours somebody from my crew is gonna
It's
get
gonna go, well,
but I
that's the best thing too, because they're gonna
that's
for
the
them.
beauty of this.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of this. And
Yeah.
you know, I have met so many women in my um suicide loss healing circle,
Yeah.
in my groups,
Uh-huh.
one-on-one, that don't they have not told certain people how their person died.
That's
Can you
so
imagine,
common.
like,
No, it's so
having
common.
to yeah, it is. I can see that now that it's common,
Mhm.
but I think about where I was at when Sean died, when I did feel like I couldn't talk about it, and when I did feel like I was the only like, I had to have been the only woman in her 40s with 3 young kids married to a high-achieving man, South Asian, West Coast, whatever, who had gone through this. If almost 4 years later, if I had to go through the last 3.5 years without feeling safe enough to say to someone, my husband died by suicide, I don't know where I'd be right now. I don't know where my kids would be right now. You cannot heal if your grief, your honest, authentic, raw grief cannot be witnessed. You can't heal.
But
And
it's part of the dark secret of suicide loss, and
yeah,
it's so common. I see it. I've seen it a million times. I people reach out to me, and sometimes I've had people reach out to me and try to connect them with someone, and then they're gone. So I have to live with knowing, is that, I don't know if you deal with that too, that maybe that person unalive themselves, like that, which is really horrible. But I think as a society, that's where you matter and I matter, that we're making a change, because at the root of all of it is, it's, if you had an injury, like you had heart failure,
yeah.
right? It's an organ. It's something wrong with your organ, in your major organ in your body.
Mhm.
And so that's why it's almost like nobody wants to talk about it, but you'll talk about if somebody has a heart attack. I mean, I know it's totally different, but I'm just trying to say,
It's
you
death. It's
it's
death
death. It's the
to an
same.
illness. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's the secret. It's that part of it where you're meant to feel shame.
Yeah.
So I think
It
what you're
just it
doing is,
breaks my heart. It
yeah, it
breaks
does.
my
And I'm sorry to talk over you. I'm a big giant
No, that's
loudmouth.
okay. That's okay.
Um, for the sake of time, and I'm sorry I was really crying this episode. I want to know where are you going with your life and the direction and living his legacy. And I love that you talked about going outside. I like to just talk about nature all the time. I go on my beach walks. I say that
Mhm,
the ocean saved my life. That's also why we love California, because we're near
mhm,
the ocean.
mhm.
Um, so talk about kind of like where you see it. I know it's a day by day thing. 4 years is very fresh, but where do you see that your work expanding to? Because I think it's so important what you're doing.
Well, thanks. I just want to keep speaking up.
Hmm.
I want to keep reaching the people who need to hear that they're not alone, that their person is worth more than the way they died, and that they are allowed to grieve openly. I want
Hmm.
to do that. And so, whether that's through social media or one-on-one work, or, maybe one day I get the opportunity to speak on stages, that's the goal right now. I don't know how much or how fast or, those kinds of things, but I know that this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I know that my work is supposed to be centered around loss, grief, and rebuilding life um, afterward. So I'd
And
love
being a mom.
and being a mom. And
Yeah.
and being a mom. And I was just going to say that I would love to see my kids get more involved. They do now, like a lot of times my middle one will grab my phone and make a video for me to post on Instagram. And I would love to see how I could get them more involved. But we're also just living like normal, busy, crazy suburban life too. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, but
Well, I see all of that for you. And life is very short. It
yeah,
goes so fast. And I think doing work like you're doing at the end of your life, if you believe in being, and I do, I'm very spiritual. I believe I'll be reunited with all the people I've lost. Um, I think you're gonna look back on your life and be like, well, even though I went through this horrible thing and we lost him the way that we did, my work mattered. And then you'll, I hope, be reunited again. That's what I think, at
yeah,
least. I like to envision being reunited and living our lives, making a difference instead of all this horrible things that are going on in the world right now. If there's more people that, work to fight insurance and, you know, spread awareness about this, we would be so much better off rather than picking up a phone every week and seeing that yet another young man has lost
mhm,
their lives this way. So your work, it matters so, so much. And I'm so grateful I met you. Again, if you're watching this on YouTube, I ugly cried throughout. So there you go. Not looking too hot right now. But I'm just grateful I met you. And I can't wait to meet you in person and go for coffee or lunch or whatever. Go to Newport, which is my favorite.
yeah, I would love
Um,
it.
okay. Well, everyone, in closing, if you are struggling, I say this all the time, or you know somebody, or you have a family member, by hearing this story, you think, maybe I need to talk to my husband about, getting into counseling, getting into therapy. Uh, I talk about, if you can't afford it, a lot of the colleges have uh, young kids that are trying to get their degrees, and they're going through counseling. They need hours. You can look into some of the colleges. There's always hope, and there's always help. And I like to say that all the time, and I cannot say it enough. And I'm so grateful I met you in person today. So please keep in touch with me. Where can everybody find you, by the way? I wanted to say that.
Yeah, I think the best place is Instagram. So
Okay.
my handle is Reshma Kearney, and my DMs are always open. I'm proud of the fact that right now I do a very good job at responding and making contact. Because again, the purpose of all of this is to just let people know they're not alone.
Yes, I love it. So thank you again. It was lovely to have you on and talk to you. And I know you have an angel. Very, very proud of you right now. So thank you. Everyone, keep going. You matter. Your story matters.
Judging Meghan with Meghan Judge.